Welcome to Good Heart Connections, a podcast of Good Neighbors Canada, where we uncover inspiring stories, share impactful insights, and connect hearts to make a better world. Join us as we meet extraordinary individuals, explore remarkable projects, and together, let's build a brighter future. Stay tuned for a dose of compassion and a world of good in every episode. For the debut of our podcast, we have Ms. Rachel Morrison, Project Manager of Good Neighbors Canada, to talk about children's rights, gender equality, and other pressing issues in today's world. Good morning, Rachel, and thank you for sharing us your time today. I'm so excited. I was so excited to get to know you professionally. So, for our audiences, Rachel is from London and now working as a project manager here at Good Neighbors Canada. Rachel, good morning again.
Morning. Hi. Wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me, Jenny.
First off, can you share a bit about your journey? What inspired you to become and be a team player here at Good Neighbors Canada?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first off, about me, I feel like I've always been very people-oriented in like career choices and even just social choices that I've made throughout my life. I care very deeply about people's well-being. So, when I was a student, I gained a master's degree in human rights from the University of Sussex over in England. And after that, I worked initially with trauma survivors. So like we call it frontline, but like direct support for people who required services. I also worked with a smaller NGO which supports rural development in an area of Zambia through providing education, access to clean water, actually a lot of the same things that Good Neighbors Zambia does. So I had a bit of that international development experience, and I also had experience in being the service provider myself as well. I moved to Canada a year and a half ago now, early 2022, and very much wanted to continue with that branch of humanitarian work. As I say, I care very much about enhancing people's well-being and have chosen for that to be my career path. So Good Neighbors was absolutely perfect. There's actually a Good Neighbors UK as well. There's 47 of us all around the world. So rarely I'd actually heard of Good Neighbors before joining the organisation. Very few of us here in the Canadian team had heard of this charity before we joined. So I knew a little bit about what the NGO did. And then when I read more about the opportunity that had come up in Good Neighbors Canada, it was so suited to all of the things that I care very much about. And I was actually brought on as the first person in our Toronto location. We used to be based over in London, Ontario. And since then, we relocated over here to Toronto, and our team has been growing. We now have quite a strong staff team, some regular volunteers who come into our Toronto office, and lots of local community members who we're strengthening our connections with, because there are quite a few of us here in the city who are also passionate about a lot of the same things as we are. So it's been a really, really lovely journey so far. I really care about all of the different projects that our charity is doing for wonderfully different reasons for each of them. And yeah, I'm really enjoying my time as project manager.
Wow. So you have jumpstart your career as, in charitable organizations.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's kind of a decision that I made during my undergrad degree, actually. I studied psychology. And from that, I know you can actually go into so many different things, having, learned about human behavior and the way that our thoughts and brains work. But a lot of people do go into sort of corporate for-profit roles from psychology. And I decided early on that didn't feel like something that I wanted to do with my energy or time. I always say, I didn't really want to contribute to making a rich person richer, but I wanted to contribute towards everybody having enough and living in a world where we can't actually say that that's true yet. I decided to, allocate my energy and my career towards making sure that people do have enough, and that making sure people have, stability, predictability, and everything that they need to thrive.
Wow, something that would make a difference.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, as someone who is deeply engaged in charity and community engagement, what do you believe are the key elements that are essential and
in the success and impact of this outreach?
So in any sense, when we're engaging a community, I always say we need to meet them where they're already at. So in our charity, we work directly with communities for our development projects. We also work a lot with other members of the community, particularly here in Canada, who are interested in supporting those development projects. So there's sort of those two arms, whether we're engaging a community to provide direct support or whether we're engaging a community who would like them to support our initiatives. So let's say for communities we're supporting with our charitable efforts, there's no point making an assessment of their needs as an external actor coming into their situation without having spoken to the people about what they want and need themselves. That will lead to a waste of money, creating irrelevant projects which the community doesn't want or need. It's very much along the lines of that white savior complex. We might go to a culture that's unfamiliar to us, a country that's unfamiliar to us, and say, oh, these people don't live the way that we do back home, and we're good back home. So when they're lacking this thing, that must be what they want to change. But actually, when we speak to a lot of the communities and get to know a bit more about their culture, a bit more about the way they treat one another, how they view interpersonal relationships, our way of living is not correct. It's one way of living. There are lots of ways of living and lots of different development projects that maybe we might not want for ourselves, but a community that we're working with, that's what they would like to happen next. So the way that Good Neighbours works is we work directly in local communities. We call them community development projects. That's when we go out into a specific place and we have actual local staff who have lived a long time in that country, maybe even their entire lives in that one country. And we talk to the community members. Communities tell us what they want and need, and we work in partnership with them to develop a whole project proposal and implement those changes in a way that they would like to see done sustainably. And then we step back as an NGO. We create these projects with the aim of not creating a form of reliance on us as a charity being there all the time implementing this support, but rather we'll work with the, I suppose, senior decision makers of a community. We'll create committees. So, for example, with our work over in Zambia, we create water and sanitation committees and community members there who learn how to sustain the work that we had done. So with the water wells, they learn how to maintain them and make sure that everything's working as it should. And then we as a charity can step away from that. We don't have to continue to provide that support, but the communities themselves who have chosen that project, who have chosen that next way, that next step to progress their community, they get to maintain it on an ongoing basis. And then I suppose with communities that we want to engage in terms of drumming up support, fundraising, awareness, advocacy, we also need to highlight the things that they care about. So again, meeting them where they're at. What's lucky from Good Neighbours' side, because we are an international humanitarian development charity, humanitarian development takes so many forms and there are so many different ways that people can engage with the things that they do. And there will often be something that someone is interested in. So we work in, children's rights, gender equity, health, education, climate change resilience, emergency relief, the list goes on. So many different aspects of our wonderful work. And that means that when we reach out to local groups, individuals, businesses, that kind of thing, often there's something that they relate to in all of the different stories that we have. So when we reach out to communities for engagement with our mission, there'll be a way that we can connect what they're interested in with something that we're doing. Another way of really engaging a community in that awareness space, I suppose, is running local events, but local events that our community expresses a want or a need for.
And I would totally agree that Good Neighbors is very diverse. We're not just under one project. It takes 30 minutes to explain to anyone what are we doing as a charity.
It does. That is the blessing and the curse of it. It's just that if someone says, what do you do? What is your charity about? It's like, well, how long do you have? Which is such an amazing thing. We really do so much. And it's because of the nature of our charity, because of the fact that people can tell us what they would like to be changed or developed in their community. Of course, you're going to get 100 different projects, way more than 100, you know. We don't do a copy paste cookie cutter type project in all of these different countries around the world. That would be completely inappropriate, and therefore we do so many different, you know, I suppose our work operates under many different umbrellas, but it's all for the same common purpose of humanitarian development.
Our listeners are passionate about making a difference, but might not know where to start. What advice would you offer them to, to get to know what charitable activities, but they're unsure where to begin?
Yeah, and that's a really standard thing. Like, lots of people really do have this motivation to do something good, but we don't quite know where to put all of that energy. Number one, complete a step for water. But yeah, if you're based in Canada, there is a great charity directory. It's called Canada Helps, an online website. So you can search on there based on what kind of cause you're looking to support. So you might particularly be passionate about mental health, women and marginalized genders, children living in poverty, you know, whatever it is that you would like to sort of donate your energy to. You can search for it on Canada Helps, and it will return a whole list of charities engaging in lots of wonderful work, where you can read about each charity. Often it will redirect you to their website, so you can really have a look at, you know, firstly, what sort of area you're interested in. When you find a charity that you're interested in, I suppose, supporting, you can reach out to them, see if they've got any events going, see if they've got any opportunities for even volunteering, if you are able to sort of dedicate that time. Of course, not everybody is. But a lot of charities will have different fundraising initiatives and events going on throughout the year to sort of, as we were talking about community engagement, you know, get people involved, spread the message about the work that they're doing, and see if, you know, learning more about that charity is right for you. You can also, of course, donate financially, but I'm aware that that can be, I suppose, a bigger commitment, especially when you're not quite sure where to begin. But through Canada Helps as well, you can find a lot of information on where you can donate financially. Often charities will both look for one-time donations and then monthly recurring donations. So if you do find one that you're really, really passionate about, and maybe you've had the opportunity to look into the charity's work, see some reports, see, you know, another good point is to look at their financial reports from previous years. All registered charities have to provide that information. And I know that a lot of people do sometimes have questions about how much of every dollar I give is going directly to the cause, how much of it is going towards sort of administrative and monitoring and evaluation fees. That can all be seen in every charity's financial reports. So if you're worried about transparency or that kind of thing, you can take a look there. And aside from, you know, financial contributions, if you are looking to contribute your time, there are lots of voluntary opportunities available on Charity Village, which is another website I would recommend. So volunteering, if you do have the time to do so, it gives you a great chance to meet lots of charity workers, really talk to them about why they've gotten involved with the work that they do, get a sense for which area of sort of humanitarian work you're interested in. That can be a really, really wonderful way, obviously, having that direct experience. But also, if you do something and then you decide, working with this charity isn't for me, you will definitely that day have met some other people that share a common interest with you. So if nothing more, you'll be connected with some great, lovely people on the whole. And it's just a really nice way of, I suppose, dipping your toes into a few different areas of charitable work.
Yes, I agree that you get friends and you get involved in community outreach as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So collaboration often plays an important role in creating meaningful change. So how have partnerships and collaborations contribute to the success of our projects here at GNCA?
Yeah, so I suppose as I've been talking, I've been mentioning all of our international partners. So collaboration is just the nature of Good Neighbours International, definitely. With all 47 of us, we all sort of work together and pick different international projects that we're interested in supporting from year to year or multiple years at a time. So we really do have a lot of partnership and collaboration around our organisation. I suppose one of the easiest examples for me to sort of explain and show the impact of partnership would be through our Goods for Causes, which is a social enterprise project that we run. So in Goods for Causes, we first launched this as like an international partnership social enterprise. So we work in collaboration with makers from cooperatives internationally, at Bangladesh, Guatemala, Mongolia, and Kyrgyzstan, and actually recently in El Salvador as well. So we collaborate with the Good Neighbours offices in those countries, who are supporting local cooperatives. And what it means, because we actually do have quite a strong currency here in Canada, we are able to purchase their handcrafted goods for a really, really good rate and contribute to those cooperatives' income stability. And then we bring those handcrafted goods over here to Canada, and we sell them to Canadians who are interested in, spending, not only buying really well-made goods, but spending money on something that does good as well, hence the name Goods for Causes. So another thing that we recently did, I suppose, as the pandemic was starting to hit, was we broadened that partnership structure, not just from doing international partnerships as well, but we noticed that obviously a lot of marginalized communities here in Canada were the ones that were the hardest hit by the pandemic. Those were the ones that were most likely to experience financial insecurity, job loss, have additional needs in their families, particularly if they were, heads of household who had children. So we also opened a branch of Goods for Causes to support people here in Canada. There are a lot of really talented makers who come from, I suppose, equity deserving groups. So the branch called Good for People was launched. Sorry, I had to say that slowly because sometimes I get my words mixed up when I'm talking about Goods for Causes. There's a lot of blank for blank in this brand. So Good for People is an initiative that we launched just as the pandemic was sort of starting to really, really hit. And through that, we support, in the same way, local artisans who want to sell their goods. And we resell them here to customers in Canada. So customers now coming into Goods for Causes have the option of choosing whether the thing was made abroad, perhaps in a country that they have personal connections to or have always wanted to visit, or by a maker here in, all of our makers are actually in Ontario at the moment. So another thing that we also do in Goods for Causes is we have a third arm called Partners for Causes. Sometimes we connect with small businesses here in Canada who do already have a relatively stable income. They've got, I suppose, a good customer base, maybe a big following if they, advertise on social media, and they see what we're doing and they like our charity's work, but they don't necessarily need the 100% financial support that we are giving to our co-ops abroad and to our makers under the Good for People initiative. So they generously sell through Goods for Causes, but they donate a percentage of the proceeds back to Good Neighbours Canada. It is at their discretion whether they would like to donate that to the Goods for Causes initiative, or sometimes they also want to donate to another cause that we run. So, for example, the emergency relief programs or a Better Life for Girls program. And through them, we are able to make a bit more money to put back into the social enterprise. So it all gets sort of reinvested and we can continue to provide really, really wonderful support to our artisans. This year, a fourth example of partnership has popped up, which has been absolutely amazing. We are now also working in collaboration with the City of Toronto, who is providing funding for this year to support the Good for People community even further. So Goods for Causes advertises sort of online and offline around the GTA. We take our products to local markets and sell them. But thanks to the City of Toronto, we are also now able to offer an incubator program for our local artisans. So we've been providing business workshops and skill development workshops, networking opportunities, and one-to-one mentorship with our very, very talented social enterprise officer, so that the micro entrepreneurs in turn can sort of grow their business and take even more value from Goods for Causes. So there's been so many different things that I've listed there. Partnerships really, really enable people to hear about us, enable us to reach the right types of people. They enable us to access funding, such as the City of Toronto. And of course, they enable us to understand the needs of the communities that we serve and how we can support them best. So the answer, I could speak about this for absolutely days. Collaboration and partnership is really what drives our charity, and the huge amount of impact that we can do can't come from just our small team. We're a great team of workers, but we really, really do, I suppose, rely on partnerships with the rest of our community in order to be able to go in directions that people want and support people in the best way that we can.
Now, it's heartwarming to know that we're supported by the city of Toronto itself, even if we just started just a year ago in here, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's been such a wonderful opportunity. We moved at the perfect time. And yeah, it's so lovely to have already established that working relationship. And we do hope that it can continue in the future too.
Yeah. So, Good Hearts Connections podcast aim to highlight both local and global challenges. From your perspective, what are some of the most pressing social issue that needs to be addressed today?
That's a huge question. Honestly, I suppose working in the development sector, I'm very attuned to answering this question from the perspective of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Um, there are 17, and all of them are equally valid, equally important. And the goals themselves were made with the hope of reaching them by 2030. We now know that unfortunately that will not be the case in a lot of different areas. Um, but yeah, to pick, I suppose, some of the most pressing social issues from my perspective, I'm personally most interested in number 5, gender equality, number 10, reduced inequalities, and number 16, which I believe is peace, justice, and strong institutions. So that is just the way that I lean in terms of like my academic background, my personal interests. But really, all of them intersect all of the time, and there's just no such thing as development in one area without addressing blatant gaps in other areas as well. So, for example, it's impossible to work on infrastructure to build up economic prospects in one country, city, area without considering the effects of climate change and how that infrastructure will need resiliency to any natural disasters that could come in the future. And that needs to be built into the planning of the infrastructure. So see how, economic development, we have to consider climate change and the societal structures and all of the different impacts that will feed in, maybe in ways that we can't even predict at the moment. They've actually recently changed the verbiage around this climate situation. We're no longer experiencing global warming. We are now officially experiencing global boiling. And so, climate change resiliency and preparedness are really, really important to consider in any aspect of any project that we would like to implement with regards to development. But I suppose a very pressing societal issue that I notice is kindness. Kindness and thoughts for well-being of other people. We are all living incredibly challenging lives for one reason or another, and at the same time, that does not make us immune to the fact that other people are also struggling in different ways, often in much more extreme ways, simply by nature of being born into a specific situation and being oppressed by that environment, by that situation they were born into. So if we're able to look at other people's problems first with kindness and put aside a phenomenon that I call whataboutism. So what about me? What about this other issue that is also incredibly valid? But that's not the thing that we're focusing on in any given topic or any given project related to development. We can support other people much better. Something that I would love to say, there's not a finite amount of empowerment, stability, joy for all of humanity to experience. And by us uplifting one very deserving community, it does not mean that we are wishing to disempower other communities or that we are saying that other issues are not valid. I think we can all work together to create a world in which we can uplift everybody, and there will be sort of a greater availability of opportunity for stability and success in whatever people define that as for themselves. And working together rather than splitting opinions and efforts will make us reach that a lot faster.
A major focus of our podcast is showcasing projects and individual stories. Could you describe a project or initiative that you're particularly proud of or had made a difference?
Yeah. One thing that we're actually no longer doing here at Good Neighbours Canada, we are seeking funding for it to be able to continue. But for now, I'm going to highlight a story of a closed project because it is one that I'm incredibly proud of. From spring 2022 to spring 2023, Good Neighbours Canada ran a project called Ukrainians in Canada. And this was shortly after the outbreak of the war in Ukraine. We, as Good Neighbours International, we responded immediately, and we now have a full-time office set up in Romania near the border of Ukraine, and we're supporting people who are leaving Ukraine. We've also got a lot of partnerships throughout the country itself of Ukraine through which we can distribute supplies and support people in sort of psychosocial projects and just ongoing emergency relief as and when it's required. But when we, of course, were sort of sharing the fact that that was something that we were doing, we were also starting to receive calls here in the Good Neighbours Canada office asking for direct support for people that would like to move to Canada, having fled Ukraine. So we weren't doing that, but the demand was there. And so we opened this program, and luckily we had a team that was strong enough to sort of put it through. So I have previous case management experience working with trauma survivors. So we were able to utilize my experience. We also brought on a dedicated refugee family case manager who was not fluent in Ukrainian, but she spoke Russian, which is such a similar language that all of the refugees were able to communicate with them in a language that felt familiar and easy to them, which when moving to a country whose language you don't necessarily speak is so important. And we supported families who were looking to move to Canada in a few different ways. So we helped them with their visa applications. We helped them with seeking accommodation as soon as they arrived, so for sort of short to medium term. We supported them with financial support in their immediate term after their relocation to Canada. And we also connected people with other services for whatever needs they had. So our refugee family case manager conducted individual needs assessments and did this on an ongoing basis throughout her case management of each family, and was able to identify when people needed support in things like employment or language or finances, psychosocial support, whatever it was. And then she could refer or signpost them directly to specialist support services for those areas of need. So we actually started out with a goal of supporting just 10 families, and we were working together here with a partner immigration service called Together Immigration, who were able to support with that visa sort of expediting program. We ended up providing support to 45 families, so 450 times our goal. 450% of our goal. And that was over 100 individual people that we were able to support with their relocation, who are now living here safely in Canada, having fled war. So that is something that I, as an individual, am incredibly proud of. As a manager at Good Neighbours Canada, I'm incredibly proud of. I think that impact is huge. And maybe people listening might think 45 families is, that's not that much in comparison to, of course, everybody that has been affected by this war. But being a charity that did not originally provide this service and having really, really exceeded our initial goal, we are so pleased with the work that we were able to do. And for the whole population of Ukraine, yes, this has been a drop in the ocean, but for each of those over 100 people, it has been a lifeline. It has been everything that they needed. Also, our work in Ukraine is still ongoing. We are running at Good Neighbours Canada a crowdfunding campaign right now to support orphanages who have had to move their children out of Ukraine and they're now living safely in Romania. And we, of course, are continuing to provide that in-country support via our partner office, Good Neighbours Romania. But for now, the Ukrainians in Canada campaign is closed down, and it's a success story that we're going to continue to tell for as long as people will listen, because I think it's such an important one, and we're really proud of our team for having implemented it.
It speaks volumes how diverse our projects here in Good Neighbours Canada or in Good Neighbours International in general. Mm-hmm. So, lastly, as we conclude this podcast, what message or call to action would you like to share to our listeners, encouraging them to take steps towards creating a more compassionate world?
Yeah, I love this question. Thank you so much for asking this question, firstly. I suppose it goes a little bit further into what I was saying earlier. My message to create a more compassionate world would be assume best intentions, and that includes best intentions of the people who are accessing support through development charities. Nobody wants to be in a position where they're relying on the support of a charity to survive, nor are any charities denying that one issue is important simply because they're supporting something else. This is all one fight for, again, people's well-being, people's stability, people's safety. Our overall aim in the development sector is to break down the systems which maintain poverty and deprivation in a sustainable and transformative way. And we want those who are living comfortably to, of course, continue to do so. So when we speak about sort of one issue in the charitable sector, my advice would be not to assume that that means that that charity or that individual or that organization is downplaying the validity of another issue. They're just highlighting A. It does not mean that B is equally deserving of attention. So yeah, you can learn about the work of Good Neighbours and other humanitarian development agencies to figure out what areas you're interested in and to begin to have conversations with people in your life about any areas which we do hold privilege and how we can use that privilege to uplift people who aren't so lucky. Because when people hold these attitudes of, again, I'm going to use my phrase, whataboutism, it doesn't come from a place of hatred, it comes from a place of misunderstanding. And so if we are able to sort of, open these conversations, open this dialogue among circles that we trust, then hopefully that impact will begin to spread and everybody will sort of begin to align on the fact that, yeah, it's important to support other people. It's also important to continue to support yourself and your own family, of course. And those issues aren't competing. They are both true. They are both important. And ultimately, we want everybody to live safely and sustainably. And that really goes back to the mandate of Good Neighbours. We work to empower people to transform communities.
Again, thank you, Rachel, for your time. We are pleased and honored to be our first guest here in Good Heart Connections. Thank you so much,
Jenny. Thank you to Good Heart Connections for having me. And I'm so looking forward to seeing the other episodes that you create with another wonderful lineup of guests.